did I end up in a whirlwind relationship that culminated in someone moving in with me after just a few months. I feel like this should be a drinking game. I'm gonna go get a glass of wine. Who lies about their height? Like, do you think I'm not gonna notice? He was being investigated for child and adult abuse. This was the first time that I experienced narcissistic rage. In this video, I'll be talking about some potentially triggering content such as narcissistic and emotional abuse, manipulation, violence, and brief mentions of sexual assault and child abuse. If the discussion of any of these topics are harmful for you or are simply too much for where you are in your mental health journey, I would definitely recommend skipping this video. The next couple of months were a bit of a whirlwind. If I thought Andrew was moving too fast in the beginning, he launched into warp speed after our first fight. And there were several key moments that I need to talk about. After my sit down with Rob, it was clear that I needed to make some time for Andrew to get to know my family. And right after the big fight, I invited everyone over for a weekend cookout. My hope was that it would be a chill, pressure-free way for us to converse while also having something grilling to occupy us in the event of any awkward silence. I severely underestimated the awkward. As soon as they arrived, the family and I got into our normal conversation groove. Like, Rob and I caught up on some work stuff. We talked about all the outdoorsy stuff we'd been doing. We showed Evelyn the arrowheads we'd collected from a recent rafting trip, but Andrew was largely silent during all of it. Completely checked out. Even when Rob would try to initiate conversation with him, he'd answer with one or two words and then walk away. Yeah. At one point, me, Rob, and Andrew were all sitting out on the back porch while I was waiting for the chicken to finish grilling, and Rob was trying desperately to get Andrew talking, just talking about anything by asking him some questions about the army, his dogs, things like that. But it was agony trying to get him to say anything at all. And ultimately, there were just long, awkward periods of complete silence. It was so strange because I was used to the Andrew that wouldn't shut up even when I wanted him to. Once everything was finally cooked and we finally sat down to dinner, it was at this point that Rob finally got him talking a little bit. And good Lord, he said the weirdest thing possible. Rob asked him why he disliked being in the army so much. Andrew's answer? It was something along the lines of how men get shafted in the army and can essentially lose their whole lives because a woman makes a false allegation against them and everyone believes it. And the specific story he was telling was about a sexual assault allegation of one of his friends that he knew wasn't true. Why would that be the only thing you'd say to my brother the whole goddamn day? Why? Rob did a really good job of keeping his composure, and I guess I did too, but I know that my face was beet red. As an aside, Rob later told me that Andrew absolutely could not make eye contact with him, could not look him in the eye. No problem looking Evelyn in the eye though. Yay. Something else I want to make note of here is that Andrew repeatedly brought this day up in future arguments. Evelyn brought her latest crochet project with her, and she was working on it while we were sitting around and chatting. Now, Evelyn pretty much always has a crochet project in hand, like always. She's working on it when we watch TV at their house, or while she and I are talking alone, or even in between her turns when we're playing a board game. But Andrew repeatedly brought this up about how awful it was to listen to me and Rob talk about work and how Evelyn was so miserable being around us. That was why she was working on her projects. Insert giant fucking eye roll here. Late August, early September was also when things really started to get dicey with Andrew's retirement. His command ramped up their attempts to get his retirement completely revoked and instead forced through what's called an admin separation. That would mean no benefits even after 20 years of service and multiple deployments. I had noticed already that Andrew had a tendency to make really impulsive decisions, but what happened next really took the cake. One evening after work, he asked if we could take a walk to talk about something difficult. Well, he dropped a bombshell on me. He had literally overnight decided to sell his home. He had decided in a matter of 24 hours and without any certainty whatsoever of what would end up happening with his retirement, that the worst possible outcome was imminent. Andrew made assumptions about all kinds of things, big and small. His latest was that he would definitely get admin separated, even though his lawyer was assuring him that would never happen, and it didn't. That he would lose all retirement benefits, also didn't happen, and that he was going to have to pay upwards of $20,000 more to his lawyer. Didn't happen. So the only possible way he could survive was if he sold his home. Here's where this gets real sketch. He's telling me this all teary-eyed, telling me that he doesn't want to be a burden on me or put pressure on me to move in together, but that once he's out of the Army, he won't be able to afford a place of his own, even an apartment, and he'll have to move back to Washington to live with family members. Dude, wave the flag. He goes on about how he totally understands that even having this conversation with me is putting undue pressure on me, but that he wanted to be honest with me. I held my ground. I told him I was glad that he let me know, but that I was still not ready to move in together, and it was just far too soon for me to be comfortable with it. I did try to talk him off the ledge though. He was still almost 2 months out from retirement, and with the housing market booming for sellers, it wouldn't take long for his place to sell if it actually came to that. Why the rush? I told him I thought he was just panicking and he needed to take a step back and just be patient with the process. Fast forward 24 hours, he put his house on the market. He came by my place all excited. He told me that he'd thought of the perfect solution. He'd already run it by everybody in his family, and they all agreed that it was a great idea. He'd sell his cabin and become a van lifer. That's right, he'd live in a van. Now, don't get me wrong. I actually really admire van lifers. I've watched lots of van tour videos, and I follow several female solo van lifers on Instagram. I personally could never do it, but if there was anybody ever suited for van life, it was Andrew. He honestly believed that this was the solution to all of his problems. He could sell both his house and his primary vehicle, and this would give him enough proceeds to purchase a van outright, and he would still have enough left over to build it out himself. He'd build out the bed and then the electrical first, because then he could immediately start living in it, and therefore he wouldn't be imposing himself on me. And bonus, if he did get his retirement benefits, then he wouldn't have to work at all post-Army. His electric would be all solar, and he wouldn't have any expenses besides food, water, and gas. The only caveat, would you mind if I stay with you just occasionally and maybe sometimes use your shower? For Labor Day weekend, we went on our first and only true camping trip together. I am talking a full weekend of complete disconnection from the outside world, cooking on a fire, sleeping in a tent. To be honest, I was super excited about it, and I loved almost every minute of it once we were out there. We even took all 5 of our dogs. But Andrew did something incredibly manipulative while on this trip. It is the one time that I feel like he truly succeeded in manipulating me. One night, while I was very intoxicated, Andrew coerced me into saying that I wanted to live together. I have these vague memories of him asking me over and over while I was completely out of it on the floor of the tent, but I was completely incapable of consenting to that, and he knew it. Red fucking flag. The next morning, I was so freaked out by the whole thing because I wasn't even really sure what I had said. I was embarrassed, I was hurt, and I felt incredibly stupid. I had let him manipulate me, and I knew it. But you know what? No. Fuck that shit. I have nothing to be embarrassed about here. I was used. I was manipulated. I did nothing wrong. But it was at this point that I was really beginning to understand who he was and how deep of shit I was in. And quite frankly, I was a little bit afraid. We never explicitly talked again about him moving in, at least not that I remember. But on September 19th, Andrew started moving things in. As I expected, his cabin sold very quickly and he had to empty it out. Almost everything he owned, which wasn't much to begin with, actually went into a storage unit. He mostly only brought clothes to my house. I did explicitly tell him, though, that he could not change his address to my house. The main reason being that I have 3 dogs. He has 2. In the city limits, you are only allowed to have 4 pets total, and 3 plus 2 is 5. On top of that, you have to license your dogs here. Mine are licensed. They are registered to my address. He can't license 2 more dogs at my address. He agreed to change his address to his dad's. I think that in some warped way, I was trying to convince myself that this wasn't actually happening, that I had not let him manipulate me into this. But he started posting things on Facebook with no warning, referring to my house as his home. I had not even had time to tell anybody about it yet. My phone immediately started blowing up with messages from friends and acquaintances asking what in the hell was going on. My hairdresser even texted me about it, for fuck's sake. Hi, Katie. This actually led to a pretty good spat between us. Andrew started yelling about all my friends being shitty people for being all up in our business. Why can't they just be happy for us? Well, shit, I wasn't happy for us. I wasn't happy about any of this. So imagine my surprise when I started getting his mail at my address. He fucking changed his address to mine. The one thing I asked him not to do. Oh, and guess what? I am still to this day getting his mail. Still. Around this time, Andrew really started showing more and more of his true colors. We had been dating around 3 months at this point, so I guess the timing fits. He had a bunch of very black and white opinions about things, and especially people. People were either good or bad. There was no in between, and pretty much everyone was bad. He had a penchant for pointing out people's faults, even people that were supposedly his friends. If anyone watching knows Andrew and climbed with him or worked with him or even just got the occasional dinner with him, he talked shit about you. He said some nasty things about every single person he encountered. I had noticed early on that Andrew didn't really have any friends. Not any true friends anyway. That in and of itself is a flag. He associated with a lot of people, but there wasn't anyone that he was actually close with, that he confided in. And I was starting to understand why. No one was good enough for him. Even his so-called best friend, a girl he'd known forever up in his home state, had all of these negative traits that he fixated on. He even started ragging on my friends. Tammy was obviously a shitty person because she told me about him reaching out to her when we had that fight. Rob was too wrapped up in politics and work, so obviously he didn't like him. He even told me that my niece was weird because during a sushi dinner one night, she stared at him the whole time. Like, okay, she's a teenager. The fuck, dude. Speaking of friends though, like he started tagging me in everything on Facebook. Things that didn't even have anything to do with me. I had already noticed that he would frequently like post things on Facebook and Instagram and then turn around and delete it the very next day if people didn't like it. Meaning like he wasn't getting enough engagement on his posts, whatever enough means. He later, like much later, admitted to me that the reason he was tagging me and everything was because I had so many more engaged friends than him, and I got so many more likes and comments. Okay, you big freak. During this period, the love bombing morphed into doing little things around the house to help out and not be a burden. He would mow the lawn or pick up the massive amounts of dog poop in the backyard since there were now 5 dogs here, and which, you know, great. I would expect someone living in my house to do things to help out. But he had to make absolutely sure that I knew he was doing these things. He made a production out of all of them. There was an expectation of a reward. To him, all of this meant that I owed him something. I owed him acknowledgement and validation. It was about this time that he started to ask me for a ring. I haven't even told anyone in real life this part, but I'm not kidding. Besides the fact that it was just absolutely ridiculous to even broach the topic of marriage, I'm not interested in getting married to anyone. And Andrew knew this, but he wanted me to profess my love by getting him a ring that he could show off to the rest of the world. He actually told me this. He wanted it to show other people that he was loved. It had nothing to do with me. It was about him. And every time he asked me if I would put a ring on it, I just answered, maybe, someday, knowing full fucking well that was never gonna happen. At the end of September, he bought his van. That dumb van would end up being my saving grace. In October, he was focusing most of his time on building it out, and I actually started to get really frustrated with just how much he was here. I work from home, and one of the reasons I like working from home is because I don't have to deal with the daily interruptions of people just stopping by my office to chat. I like it because I'm more productive, but around this time, the Army told Andrew to stop coming on to base. It was essentially like him being on leave, so he was just here all the time, constantly coming into my office and just sitting down and talking or grabbing at me because, oh yes, that annoying behavior started again. Or he was asking me to come outside so he could show me some dumb thing he did on the van that I did not give two shits about in that moment. I have never been more miserable in my entire life. I love the living alone, and he took that away from me by nefarious means. Mid-October, the family came over again to play D&D. We had been planning this day for weeks. It was going to be my nephew's maiden voyage as a DM, and we were going to be playing a homebrew campaign that he had written. My nephew was so excited, and honestly, I was too. In preparation for the campaign, we had to build out new characters, and man, I was like already frustrated with Andrew ahead of the game day because even though he seemed enthusiastic about playing for the first time, he chose to play a pre-made, well-known character from a series of books. It was completely lame and unoriginal, and if you have ever played D&D, you know that's not how it's done. But the day of the actual game was even worse. I had explained to Andrew that we would be playing for hours, literally hours. We made snacks, we had food, like it's a deal, it's a whole day kind of thing. But I also explained that he had to be involved and imaginative for it to be fun. And once again, he totally checked out. Knowing that this afternoon was coming, that this game day was coming, and knowing the commitment that it took, he spent most of the day outside hooking up his stupid solar panels because it just had to be done that day. And when he was in the room with us, he acted like a complete fucking jackass. He was making intentionally bad and uncharacteristic decisions for the tune that he was playing, which ended up harming our entire party. But it gets worse. He, for some reason, known only to him, went on a tangent again about women, completely unprompted. This time, it was about how women use men to get what they want. And he did this in front of my sister-in-law and my teenage niece. Andrew never made these derogatory comments about women to me, so I was always baffled why he would say these things in front of them. But Rob pointed out later that he wasn't saying them to us. He was saying these things to Rob. It was his attempt to commiserate with my brother. And this is something that my abusive ex did too. Gross. All of this brings us to the explosive culmination of mine and Andrew's relationship. By the start of November, Andrew had received confirmation that he would officially retire on the 30th, 1 month after his original retirement date. His terminal leave was reinitiated, meaning that he was free to spend the next month however and wherever he wanted. By this point, he had gotten far enough on his van build that he could comfortably travel in it. So that is what he decided to do. Thank God. On November 2nd, he embarked on a 3-week road trip. His plan was to travel through various state and national parks in Utah, Arizona, then up the West Coast. And he'd be back just before Thanksgiving to spend the holiday with me. I was ecstatic. Words cannot describe like how much I was looking forward to him just being gone. I would have my house back to myself for a few weeks, and I could get back into a stable routine with my dogs. I could really focus during my work days. I could hang with Rob and Evelyn again on the weekends. I even occupied some of my free time by starting a large woodworking project with another friend, Christy. My hope was also that this little break might, make the heart grow a little fonder. And truth be told, it kind of did. Because Andrew was traveling in such remote locations with no cell phone service, we'd sometimes go a day or two without talking. He was taking some amazing photos along the way and then uploading them in batches to social media. And honestly, I was a little bit jealous of his adventures, and I wished that I'd been able to go with him. As his return date approached, I found myself actually looking forward to seeing him again. On Saturday, November 20th, Andrew had departed his last stop and was making his way back. He was texting me periodic updates to let me know where he was, and by early afternoon, he had crossed the border into Colorado. I was piddling around the house, tidying up, and then I got a really random text message. I may have made your mom mad. What? How? I pointed out her argument was flawed on Facebook. It's kind of hard to disprove video. Shrug emoji. I had no idea what the hell this boy was fucking talking about. Flawed argument about what? I need a little context here. I need a snack. She said the sex offender who was yelling, "Shoot me fucking N-word," to Kyle was acting in self-defense. I don't think your mom watched the videos. I honestly had no idea what Andrew was talking about. I figured out that he was talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial that had just ended, but I hadn't paid that close attention to specific pieces of evidence. I did not know what videos he was talking about, and for the life of me, I could not find this exchange with my mother on Facebook. I searched her profile and his, but I could not figure out where this conversation had occurred. I immediately felt really strange about this. For one, in his text message to me, he had not actually censored the N-word. He spelled it out. Two, why was he even talking to my mother? He had never met her, and he had never spoken to her before. I honestly had no idea how to respond to this, so I just ended the conversation. I think I literally just said, okay, and he didn't bring it up again. When Andrew arrived that evening, I had honestly pretty much forgotten about it. I had not heard from my mom, so I assumed it wasn't a big deal. He was beaming when he saw me, and I was admittedly excited to see him at first. He was exhausted from the drive. We'd had plans to go get sushi for dinner, but it was so late that we ended up ordering pizza. So we unpacked his stuff, and he excitedly showed me his spoils from the trip. Stickers for the van, arrowheads. He'd even brought me back a coffee cup. That night, laying in bed though, my brain would not stop screaming at me. The reality of him and his dogs being back in my personal space, it all came crashing in on me very quickly. All I could hear in my head was, get out, get out, get out. It was so loud in there that I was afraid I was actually gonna scream it out loud. Little did I know that the very next day, he would cross that rage boundary with me for the second time and make my path forward clear as fucking day. Christy and I had plans on Sunday to work on the woodworking project we had been building for the past several weeks. I was really looking forward to this day because it was our first pour of epoxy. Andrew had a number of things he needed to do, climbing gym, laundry, stuff like that. So the plan was for him to swing by her house that afternoon as we were wrapping up so that he could see our progress. And then he and I would go out to dinner. But by that night, we had completely imploded. At 11:58 a.m., right as I was parking in Christy's driveway, I received a text message from Rob. It was screenshots of the conversation the day before between Andrew and Mom. It was the first time I saw what was actually said. For context, Mom's original comment was not to Andrew. It was not to anyone in particular. It was a public comment on a news article on Facebook. The article was about the public outrage over Kyle Rittenhouse's not guilty verdict and the ramifications of the court of public opinion for the rest of Kyle's life. Here's what was said. Mom said, "How do we know the two people who died didn't see Kyle with a gun and considered him a threat? Not just to themselves, but everyone there. How do we know they weren't rushing him to attack him, but to disarm him and stop him from shooting people? We don't know that because they're dead. Carrying around a gun openly in a situation like that is asking for trouble. I've heard this argument a lot about the open carry laws. How are we supposed to identify the good guys from the bad? We will never know the intent of the men who died. Maybe they were just trying to stop what they perceived as a bad guy. Kyle may not be guilty of murder, but he deserves everything he's gotten and will get the rest of his life for his stupid, careless behavior." Andrew responded, "'Cause there is video of the guy screaming, 'Shoot me fucking N-word.' Kyle doesn't shoot him. Then the guy chases Kyle, attacks him, throws shit at him. Sorry, if a registered sex offender is screaming, 'Shoot me N-word,' and attacks me, I'm shooting him. Sorry if your feelings are hurt," Mom replied. Andrew, care to share that video? The only video I've seen is someone rushing him and Kyle shoots him before he gets to him. There was no verbal exchange. But that wasn't really the point of my comment. Showing up with a rifle provoked and incited the conflict between them. You have to wonder if he were actually there administering medical help as he claimed, with no rifle, if any of that would have happened. Nor was he standing guard at someone's business. He was wandering the streets brandishing a rifle. He has no one but himself to blame for what he's been through, except maybe his mother. Andrew. Wandering the streets? He was at one location and then was chased through the streets by a mob. That's called retreating. He didn't provoke anyone, he retreated. He was attacked, he defended himself. I have a gun on me right now. That doesn't give you or anyone else the right to attack me. And if someone does, and I fear for my life, I have every right to shoot you. You can literally watch all three altercations on video and see exactly what happened. Odd that you only saw one small portion that only fits the narrative that whatever news channel you are watching fed you. And if you want to see the video, Google Joseph Rosenbaum shoot me N-word video. You can also watch the video of Joseph chasing, attacking, and Kyle retreating until he has to shoot. Mom finally replied, "Andrew, the only video I've seen was on Fox. What narrative do you think I'm trying to fit? I'm not anti-gun, LOL. I have a concealed carry permit because just like my Amex, I never leave home without one. My husband wears a sidearm. There is literally a gun tucked away in every room of our house and dozens more locked up. You are totally missing my point. Let me try this one more time. This is not about your rights or what is legal. It's about stupid behavior. He showed up to a volatile protest brandishing a rifle, which did him no good in protecting businesses if he got chased off down the street. Explain that. He had a rifle and they chased him away. What good was the rifle? But I digress. Unless you are wearing a uniform, it's best not to show up to a protest brandishing a rifle. Bad things will happen. He is proof of that. How the hell do you tell the good guys from the bad? That was the point of my comment." To this day, I have no idea how Andrew even found my mom's comment on that article. Rob later sent me a link to it, but I wasn't able to find it by searching. Also, Andrew again did not censor his use of offensive, racist terms. I am censoring them here because it's fucking gross. I was flabbergasted. I'm not even gonna go into the fallacies of his dumb arguments. That's not the point. But why on earth did he think it was appropriate to speak to my mother that way? My mother. a woman he had never interacted with before, had never met. My mom, sorry if your feelings are hurt. That line alone was dripping with contempt. And then he tried to drag me in the middle of it the day before. Tried to get me on his side before she had a chance to tell me about it. As if I was ever going to agree with him on this. I walked into Christie's and I just lost it. I told her pretty much everything that had been going on, and I filled her in on this latest round of tomfoolery, and Rob and I texted throughout, and the more I talked with him and Christy, the more freaked out I got. My anxiety was like ratcheting up higher and higher, and I was having trouble focusing on the project at hand. But I powered through it. Here is the exchange between me and Rob. It was kind of sporadic because I was also in the middle of trying to pour epoxy into this big woodworking project that we'd been working on for literally weeks. Okay, seriously, what the fuck? This is how he chose to engage with mom for the first time, and he certainly has no issue throwing racial slurs around, and a lot of hints about typical media conspiracy. There is something wrong here. He told me he was debating with mom about the trial thing, but I hadn't seen it. Rachel, he has issues with a lot of different people. He just continues to reveal his true self. This is not a good situation, and deep down you know it. I become more and more worried for you every time I learn something new. I'm super annoyed about this and honestly really surprised, but what other things are you talking about? Also, where even is that post? Because I can't find it. He links to the post. He has deep-seated issues with women. He is not interested in anyone else's lives or activities. He's also very quickly attached himself to your house. He also probably has issues with people of color as he's defending a white supremacist. The gun fantasy doesn't help my opinion. So by this point, I was a nervous fucking wreck. Andrew had finished up at the gym and was on his way to Christie's. Christy was freaked out because now he knows where she lives. And I was literally asking her, I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do right now? So I recalled the pact that Andrew and I made. If we had something difficult to talk about, we'd go for a walk and talk it out until it was resolved. I was under no illusion that this would be resolved, but I was also in no way comfortable having this conversation within the confines of my home. My plan was to pretend like everything was fine when he came by Christie's, and I would head home, then immediately ask him to walk with me. I could hear his music blasting when he pulled up to her house, so I walked out front to meet him, and I guided him in through the house to Christie's garage. She and I both kept our composure. We talked him through everything we'd done with our project. He was only there maybe 10 minutes when I suggested that we head back to my place. I walked him out, and then I went back inside to say goodbye to Christy and get my things. And I remember just like putting my head in my hands and saying to her, how did I get here? Oh my God, I hate this. She asked me to text her later and let her know I was okay, and I headed out. So I returned home about 3 p.m., but Andrew wasn't there yet. And in fact, it would take him nearly 30 minutes more to arrive, which was odd because he left Christy's house before I did. I never even took my coat off. I never took my coat off or let the dogs out or even turned on the lights. I just paced back and forth. I reread the messages between Andrew and Mom. I reread the texts from Rob. I practiced the things that I needed to say to Andrew, how I would say them. When he finally got there, he walked in carrying bags and blabbing about things he had just bought, but it was all going in one ear and out the other. I finally just stopped him and said, I have some things on my mind and we need to talk. Will you take a walk with me? No dogs, just you and me. He looked a little worried or like maybe caught off guard, but he said, of course he would. So he put his coat back on and we walked out the front door. So as we got to the sidewalk, I wasted no time. I very calmly said, I just want to talk about what happened yesterday with my mom. I'm trying to understand what the goal was, what you were trying to accomplish in that conversation. I said it just like that. That is tone and everything. That is how I said it. We had only made it maybe 20 feet down that path, and he did a complete 180, threw his hands up in the air, and screamed at me, I am not fucking talking about this. And he stormed back to the house and went inside. Here we go. Time to party. What on earth just happened? I took my time walking back, and when I got inside, he was like standing at the dining room table, just like angrily rooting through all of his shopping bags. So fucking dramatic. And so I just like leaned up against the refrigerator and just stood there, wide-eyed, unable to comprehend like what was going on. So I leaned against the fridge and I folded my arms in front of me, and without even looking up at me, again, his voice dripping with contempt. Are you just gonna stand there staring at me? Yep. Yes, I am. You're gonna act like a child, I'm gonna treat you like a fucking child. So he starts moving from room to room, putting away his new clothes and like slamming drawers in the process. And that is when I lost it. I wanted an answer. Why in the world did he think it was appropriate to talk to my mother that way? What was he trying to accomplish? And that was when he started going on and on about how we all had an agenda, a political agenda, about how we were all slandering Kyle Rittenhouse, about how we were all so caught up in trying to fit everything into our own narrative that we refused to see outside opinions. He kept asking me to prove that Kyle Rittenhouse was a white supremacist, and that meant I was calling him a white supremacist and a racist, and now I'm slandering him. Dude, it was fucking bizarre. That shit was crazy, man. It was wild. It was crazy. He, again, tried to turn everything around on me. All of this was somehow my and my family's fault. Just as a side note, I will come back to this and explain what this particular manipulation technique is called. But at this point, I repeated my question. Why did you talk to my mother that way? And he started screaming at me again. Oh, so she's allowed to run her fucking mouth and I'm not. You're just pissed because I destroyed her. Interesting choice of words. I screamed right back at him. This has nothing to do with politics. This is about the fact that in polite societies, we don't talk to our girlfriend's mother that way, you fucking asshole. And with that, he just completely shut down and stopped talking to me. He leashed up his dogs and he left. The whole scene lasted all of about 5 minutes. I shit you not. Oh man, I'm a fucking psychopath. So seriously, what in the fuck just happened? Back to that side note real quick. That bizarre off-topic ranting that had absolutely nothing to do with the question I asked him is a form of gaslighting, but it's specifically a manipulation tactic called narcissistic word salad. It's a type of narcissistic speech that is purposefully confusing. It's extremely frustrating because the narcissist uses circular reasoning, outright lies, denial, or mischaracterizations of events to avoid being wrong or having to take responsibility for something. He used this on me all the time. I just didn't know what it was called, or that, honestly, that it even had a name. So after Andrew left, I got on the phone with Rob for the next couple of hours, and I just let it all out. The more we talked, the more pissed I got, the more worried. At one point, Rob asked me if Andrew had his gun on him. Interestingly, that reminded me about what he said to Mom in that comment thread, that he had a gun on him at that moment. Before Andrew left on his trip, I suggested he take his firearm with him. He was going to be staying in remote locations where there would be large wild animals. I felt he should take it with him for safety. While he was traveling, he did encounter a bear, and I asked him if he took his gun. He told me he ended up deciding not to bring it because of gun laws in some of the states he would be traveling through. So who was he lying to? Me or my mom? I checked the closet. His gun was gone, as well as all of his ammo. That meant that he had it on him right now in his van. He had lied to me. I stayed on the phone with Rob until I saw the van pull up outside. And then I sat down at the dining room table and I pulled up a coloring app on my iPad because it eases my nerves. Andrew walked in and sat down across from me, and he smiled and sheepishly said, "Hi." Just like that. I just stared at him. After a few moments of silence, he told me that he apologized to my mom. Rob later sent me a screenshot of it. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for being rude the other day. I don't have excuses for what I said, and I could have debated in a less heated manner. I think I was way more grumpy than I intended to be. I'm sorry, it wasn't cool. Who fucking talks like that to a grown-ass woman? Anyway, this asshole actually thought that this was just a typical fight and he could come in and apologize and everything would be fine. And what the fuck even was that half-ass apology to my mom? I could have debated better. This mess was all out in the open now. And on some level, he had to know that, right? It was the weekend before Thanksgiving. Andrew had to know that Rob knew about this. So what? We were just supposed to kiss and make up, go to Rob and Evelyn's for Thanksgiving dinner in a few days. It'd be like nothing ever happened. He really thought that. I remained calm and I told him that this wasn't something we could recover from. And he seemed like genuinely surprised, but at least he didn't lash out at me. I told him I can't keep doing this, walking on eggshells, unable to bring up difficult conversations because I was afraid he'd blow up. I told him that I thought he had a problem being challenged by a woman and that would always be an issue for us because I am a strong, independent, opinionated woman. And then I told him he needed to leave. So he did. Not before quipping that he was so glad he rushed home from his trip to spend Thanksgiving with me. But he did leave. Once Andrew was safely out of the house, I let Rob and Christy know I was okay and I called Mom. It was an emotional conversation. Andrew's lashing out at her caused all kinds of turmoil in her head. It effectively undid a lot of progress she's made over the years with her own emotional well-being. She did not want to reach out to me because she was afraid I'd see it as her butting into my business. But at the same time, she was terrified for me because she was afraid that I was unaware of this side of him. Ultimately, and thankfully, she reached out to Rob. I assured her that she should never feel afraid to reach out to me in a situation like this, that his behavior was not okay, and that I called him out on it. We were done. She was emotional, but very thankful we talked. She told me that she hadn't slept a wink the night before just due to anxiety and worry, and she was looking forward to getting a good night's rest. After we hung up, I sat down on the sofa and I just sighed. A sigh of relief. I had escaped. I was out. I was free. I knew it wasn't completely over yet. I knew he'd tried to weasel his way back in, but I had a firm out. Later that evening, I got the first of a series of apologies, this one via text. I love you. I don't know what just happened. I'm human. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I'm not good in arguments. Walking away to cool off and come back is the only healthy thing I know to do. But I'm not sexist. I'm not racist. I do think I'm a good person, and while I strive to be kind, I also know I'm not always. But I keep trying and I don't give up. My actions for the last 5 months in everything I do shows I care about you and I love you. I meant everything I said to you about how I feel in the future. I'm sorry you're hurting now from actions I said or did. I never meant to hurt you. I'm willing to work on this. I don't want to give up on you or us. I think what we have is special. But I also respect your view and what makes you comfortable too. If you want me to go, I will. Not because I want to, but because I love you and I just want whatever makes you happy. Is it my imagination or does that just like sound like a form apology? Like a form letter? I wouldn't have like even considered like talking to him anyway about it, but that is just so generic, you know, like most generic apology ever. Anyway, I didn't respond. And of course I sent it to Rob and he wrote back, he is sexist, he's likely racist, and that last sentence is just gaslighting. Yep, that about sums it up. The next few days were annoying, awkward, and seemingly endless. It was the week of Thanksgiving. I was on vacation the whole week. I was off work. On Monday morning, the day after the drama went down, I woke up to a minor crisis with one of my dogs and I needed to take him to the vet unexpectedly. On top of that, regardless of vacation, there are always like some work things that I have to deal with on Monday mornings, things that only I can do. Andrew had slept in his van, but he came in super early to use the restroom and asked if he could shower. I motioned him to the bathroom and I made myself breakfast and called the vet while he did his thing. After he got cleaned up, I explained that I had several things to do that day and he told me he would just stay out of my hair. He just needed to come back in the afternoon at some point to print off some paperwork for the Army. And he asked if I was comfortable with him being in my home without me being there. And I was honest and I told him no. Then he once again brought up how sorry he was for talking to my mom the way he did. I was exasperated with this conversation, but I let him keep talking. He fucking qualified his apology. He told me he talked to his sister and showed her the conversation and she didn't think there was anything rude about it. It does not matter what your sister thinks about it. It doesn't matter. My feelings matter, or at least they should. And then he said something that just cemented the fact that nothing I said or did mattered. I told him that I talked to my mom the night before, and I explained to him the tailspin of emotions that he sent her into and why. About how he very nearly undid all of her progress over the last several years. His response, "I thought you didn't even like her." Holy projection, Batman. Listen, I love my mom. She and I have had ups and downs over the years, of course. Most kids do with their parents. While I had told Andrew about some of the downs, I had also told him about the ups. She and I had a heart-to-heart about some heavy shit a few years ago, and I've seen authentic changes, progress. I may not have done a good job of telling her that I see the hard work she's putting in to grow, but I definitely told him, and he heard none of it. I stood there in front of him that morning and said, "You just proved to me that you've never heard a single word I've said." And I just walked out. At first, he was planning to stay the entire week. Parked outside of my house in that van. He also continued to send me a barrage of text messages over the next 2 days about the most random things as if we weren't in the middle of a breakup. I'm just going to read them in the order they were received because it's fucking weird and it makes me laugh to this day. So enjoy this dramatic reading, or actually this non-dramatic reading, of all of the texts I received. Your Christmas tree looks great. How is Bruce? If you need any help with him, I don't mind at all. I get my blue ID card today. Starry eyes emoji, mind blown emoji, laughing emoji, heart eyes emoji. Only retirees get it. Thanks for having my back during those tough days. It made them infinitely more bearable. It meant a lot to me having you there. Picture of his certificate of retirement. Picture of his DD-214. I didn't know who to put as relative and didn't know folk addresses, so I put you. Hope that's okay. Side note, what the fuck? This is such a weird feeling. Sad because we're over. Giddy because I'm out finally. Would you want to celebrate tonight with me? I responded no to that one, just FYI. Fair enough, but still wanted to extend the offer. Today is the last day I'll wear the uniform. Feels surreal. Feels like the best day of my life. Picture from inside his van. Link to a love song on Spotify. Video compilation of photos from our first big hiking trip. Still one of the best days, grin emoji. Photo of me at dinner with him in Manitou. This was one of my favorites too. Bet you didn't know that. Sometimes new things are the best things because of who is with you and you're doing something new. What was your favorite adventure? Think our camping trip was one of the best for me. Yeah, the one where you fucking manipulated me into like consenting to you moving in. Sure it was. Do I have any microwavable meals still in the chest freezer? Thanks for looking. You sure you really want me to leave tomorrow? It still feels so surreal. I told him yes, I still wanted him to leave. You sure you're sure that you're sure? For sure? I'm sure. Okay, I'll miss you. Did you giggle at my for sure comment? Smiley face. What time are you going to bed? Did you ever listen to that song? Want to see another one? Laugh. Link to another Spotify song. No like? Is there any chocolate ice cream? What time are you setting your alarm for tomorrow? Okay, sweet dreams. Good night. Dude, just stop. Just stop. I was annoyed with the constant texting when we were together. It is infinitely worse when you're broken up. I responded to a couple of the messages, specifically the direct questions, but I think when he realized I wasn't giving in was when he finally altered his plans to leave sooner. And on Thanksgiving morning, I woke up from the nightmare and truly gave thanks. I watched that big ass silver van drive off West Coast bound, and I breathed a massive sigh of relief. The last narcissistic manipulation tactic that I want to talk about is hoovering. It gets its name from the Hoover vacuum. Hoovering is an attempt to see if the prior target can be conned into another cycle of abuse, so that the narcissist can reclaim their sense of power and control, either by causing emotional or sometimes physical distress. Basically, they try to suck you back in, like a vacuum. Some of the common ways they try to do this are by reestablishing communication after a period of time, love bombing, repentance, threats of self-harm, and employing flying monkeys. With Andrew, it started almost immediately. Before he even left the state, he sent his sister my way via Facebook Messenger. It was a long ass letter talking about how she's seen him in a lot of relationships and he's definitely different with me, whatever that means. And you know, she was really sweet about it, but he had given her his version of events. He made it about me calling him a racist again. And while to her credit, she did call him out on his behavior, that's still not the point. That wasn't even what I said, even though I do think he's a racist. She said that he didn't know she was writing to me and asked that I keep it between us. I knew that was a lie, so I gave her my full version of events, including the fact that he has a big problem with women and that his words and behavior are, quite frankly, alarming. And I knew full well that she would immediately send it back to him. And she did. He told me. Hilariously, he told me that this was the first he was hearing about any of these problems. Dude, where have you been the last 5 months? Or even just the last 5 days? I explicitly said all of these things to you. For a couple of weeks after that, I got a reprieve, but then he messaged me on Christmas Eve, wishing me and the dogs and the family a Merry Christmas. Oh, and that I hoped I liked the present he had left me. I had actually opened it on Thanksgiving Day, the day he left. It was a card that he had left sitting front and center on my Christmas tree, but it had a gift certificate to a climbing gym by my house. I kept the gift certificate. I threw away the card. He'd written a long ass note from cover to cover about how he hoped that I continue doing things that I love, that I meet people that challenge my views, that I try new things that challenge me, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, the whole diatribe just pissed me off. Meet people that challenge my views. Honestly, you're gonna say that as you're leaving town after a fight that you continue to try to twist into a debate about political views, when really it was just about you being a giant manipulative asshole? Whatever, dude. Anyway, I was trying to remain cordial with him for a couple of reasons. One, there are very few exes that I've just completely cut out of my life. I'm friends with many of them on Facebook or Instagram, and every year or two we check in with each other just to see how the other is doing. I don't have many enemies from my past. There are a couple, but not many. And two, in this particular case, it was kind of for my own safety. I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I just had this gut feeling that there was more to Andrew's story than I knew. Bad things. And given that most of his belongings are still in storage here in Colorado, and he lives in a fully mobile home, his van, he could show up here at any time. I guess I just didn't want to be caught unaware. So on Christmas Day, I wished him a Merry Christmas too. And I intentionally did not thank him for his gift because at this point I'd already put the pieces together. I knew he was a covert narcissist and I wasn't going to feed that need for narcissistic supply. That night, I was at Rob and Evelyn's trying to enjoy a damn movie on Christmas with my family, and I got this. Can I ask you something? Do you really want me as a friend? It doesn't really feel like it on this end. If you said it to just be nice, I get it. If that's the case, I can try to figure out my mail. I just wanted to know how you feel, honestly, so we both can make the best choices for ourselves to heal and move on. Dude. You want to try to gaslight me? Cool, I can dish it out too. I didn't say it just to be nice, but it takes time to go from the end of a relationship to that point of being, well, friendly. I'm processing stuff and focusing on spending time with family and by myself. So, if being connected with me on socials is preventing you from healing and moving on, I totally understand. I know it was a petty response. I was petty on purpose, okay? It was late when I finally responded, so I just went to bed after sending that, and of course, I woke up to more. I typed out a small book, but I'm not sure it's what I wanted to say. I guess because it's fresh, some things still sting. With more time, things will hurt less. I understand and appreciate you explaining your point of view. I care about you. I hope our path hasn't ended yet. I may need some time to put the feelings farther behind, but when I get there, I hope you're in a place where you can be friendly too. Okay. He also started getting weird with my friends and family on Facebook right after this. He unfriended Evelyn, but didn't unfriend anybody else. He never engaged with Rob, but he constantly liked Tammy's and Christy's posts. Christy regularly posts memories and birthday messages for old friends, people I've never even met. And I don't engage on those posts because I don't know those people. But Andrew was. It was super creepy. A couple of days later, I finally learned the truth of what my gut was trying to tell me all along. I watch a lot of true crime. A lot. My TV is usually on Investigation Discovery, or I'm streaming YouTube videos from mystery or crime channels to my TV. I specifically enjoy watching videos on criminal psychology and body language analysis. So one evening, I'm working on a macrame project, and I have a queue of criminal psych videos streaming directly to my TV, right? I'm listening, but I'm focused more on my project that's right in front of me. Until I get to one on Paul Bernardo. You know, from the Ken and Barbie serial killers. It's a video breaking down the only police interview with him that has ever been released to the public. The interview was conducted 10 years into his incarceration, and the analysis focused on the narcissistic manipulation tactics that he was using with the detectives. I did not intentionally cue this video up. It was just on autoplay. But as soon as it started, I couldn't even focus on my macrame project. I was glued to the TV. I literally walked from over there and stood in front of the TV, just focused on that show. I felt like I was watching a fight between me and Andrew. The body language, the tone of his voice, the facial expressions, even the specific words he was using, it was Andrew to a T. And in that moment, I could not stop myself. I needed to know what else was in his past. So I paid for a background check. I specifically wanted to see if there were any other criminal arrests in his past. And boy, I was not expecting what I found. 2006. Arrested for domestic violence, assault in the 4th degree. Charges were dismissed. 2010. Arrested on 2 counts of assault. One was a misdemeanor simple assault, 4th degree. The other was a felony assault, 2nd degree, with strangulation. Again, charges were dismissed. 2015. Accused of and investigated for a sexual assault. And then, of course, there was the investigation in 2021 for child and adult abuse that threatened his Army retirement. You know what? For this one, I think I can be done with the red flags for now. I think we've covered them all. That's all the red flags. Yeah, okay. All right. But I knew it. I fucking knew it. I knew that there was something more there. And how? How had he been getting away with this for so long? How did authorities not see the pattern here? How the hell am I supposed to process this? I went to bed so unsettled that night. I had nightmares, and I have had nightmares. I've had many nightmares since learning this, and that fucking sucks. And there's something else I need to emphasize here. In between me writing this script and filming it, I unintentionally stumbled across an alarming statistic. I was binging a bunch of videos on the YouTube channel of the beautiful, amazing, talented Swoop. Wouldn't you know it, this particular statistic was discussed in her second documentary on the timeline of the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie case. You know, that case about the two young van lifers that was all over the news in 2021. So ironic, man. If you're unfamiliar, the very, very brief synopsis is that Gabby Petito went missing in August. Her fiance showed up in Florida with her van, but without her, and her remains were found weeks later in the Grand Teton National Forest. Her death was ruled a homicide by manual strangulation. Her fiance, Brian Laundrie, was named a person of interest. He disappeared, and his remains were later found in an environmental park in Florida. His death was ruled a suicide, and the FBI has since released a statement that Brian claimed responsibility for Gabby's death in a notebook that was found in the same area as his remains. So Swoop's video pointed me to a website for the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention. It's an organization that provides consulting, training, resources, and support services to professionals working in the field of domestic violence and sexual assault. In an article for the Institute, a 2008 study from the Journal of Emergency Medicine is cited. The study found that 43% of women who were murdered in domestic assaults and 45% of the victims of attempted murder had been strangled by their partner within the year before. In a more recent case study, it found that domestic violence strangulation is a significant predictor of attempted and completed murder. If you want to look at the numbers end of things, it statistically increases the odds by 7. Non-deadly strangulation is, without a doubt, an indication that the person isn't against the idea of killing their partner. Let that sink in for a moment. Okay. Back to my story. The next day, I went on my first big solo hike. I'm working towards some pretty big goals, and I wanted to close out the year with something to push myself. So I went up in the mountains and I did an 8-miler with a pretty intense elevation gain. I didn't have cell phone service for most of it, but I did find one spot with enough signal to post a selfie on the trail. I had an amazing day and I was super proud of myself at the end of it. And then I got home and saw the messages from Andrew. At 11 Mile Canyon, if you follow the road till the end, there's a campground on the right. Before you cross the bridge that is there will be a very small sign and dirt trail that goes off to the right. You hike that up probably half a mile and it drops you off on a cliff that overlooks not only the dam, but the entire lake and as far as you can see. I was planning on taking you there, but we never got around to it. I think you'd love it. It's as beautiful as Paradise Cove. If you need pen or map, just let me know and I'll get it. Hike is short, little rocky, but beautiful. They mark the trail with stacked rocks. Think Evelyn could make it too. I bet Betty could too. Anyways, hope you go. Like, dude, what the fuck? I didn't respond because, well, I didn't want to. And besides that, I thought our last exchange was clear. I am not in a place where I can be friendly. If that's a problem for you, disconnect from me on social media. Nonetheless, that evening I got more. Should I not message you anymore about whatever? Feels very unwanted. If you want to be friends, cool, but don't treat me as less than. I responded to this one. I have already told you where my head is at right now. It sounds like it would be easiest for us both if we just go our separate ways. And he responded, yeah, probably. I responded and let him know that I had sent his stack of mail to him and also his spare van key that he had left here. And he said, thank you. You have my address if anything else shows up. If anything important happens, you have my number. It did hurt seeing you delete our pics on Instagram, but not Facebook. You didn't delete your ex-husband's stuff, and he did horrible things to you. Your engagement video of him proposing is still up. But I did see you reconnected with him on Instagram, so I guess that explains that. I know none of that is my business anymore. It still hurt to see, and I know that's my fault for looking. I won't look anymore. Really do wish you the best. Glad you caught the outdoor bug. I loved you a lot. I tried. Take care, Rachel. Boy, bye. Get the fuck out of here. No. Like, seriously, did we not just talk about this 2 days ago? But also, stop making fucking assumptions, you asshat. 1, I didn't delete anything off Instagram. I archived some photos because I didn't want to have to see them. They're still there. I didn't delete them. They just don't show up when you look at my feed. And it was only the photos of us being all lovey-dovey because gross. All the other photos are still up. 2, I didn't reconnect with my ex-husband. I have been following him on Instagram since we started dating over 10 years ago. I never unfollowed him when we divorced. The only reason Andrew could possibly think that we had reconnected was because I liked one of his photos at Thanksgiving. And the only way Andrew could have even found that was if he scrolled all the way back in my Instagram history, found a photo that my ex was tagged in from over 3 years ago, gone to my ex's profile, and looked at each individual photo for the last several months to see who liked it. I only liked one over a month before this happened. Creep. 3, my ex-husband didn't do horrible stuff to me. He did horrible stuff to himself that ultimately impacted our marriage. Once again, proof that Andrew never listened to a goddamn word I said. 4, mine and my ex's engagement video, where did he even find that? As far as I know, I never posted that to Facebook. Maybe I did. I honestly don't know. I know it's not on Instagram, but I posted it on my personal YouTube channel, the one that I don't use and haven't used in years. Like, I'm talking about my old ass channel. I don't think I ever posted that video anywhere else. If I did, I'm not aware of it. But even still, like, even if I don't know how to find it, like, how the fuck did he find it? That is some next level fucking stalking. But all of this was just to try to bait me into a fight or something. And it's gaslighting. I didn't respond. I'm not gonna take the bait. Like, I just ignored it. On the upside, he unfriended me and everyone I know on Facebook. I unfriended his sister, so that means we have 0 mutuals and he can no longer see anything on my page due to my privacy settings. We also mutually unfollowed each other on Instagram. Since then, he has either blocked me or completely deleted his Facebook account. Who fucking knows? But that still didn't stop the messages from coming. Since he could no longer reach me on Messenger, he just started texting me again. And I'm talking just completely random messages, pictures of his travels, comments about his heart being content, frequent morning messages telling me he hopes I have a good day. Like, what is going on? He also bought a physical postcard to mail to me, I guess. When I didn't respond to any of these messages for a solid week, he finally sent me a text that said, "Did you block me? I'm confused." What is there to be confused about, motherfucker? Like, I don't understand. Just stop. So I sent him a screenshot of the last conversation saying we should go our separate ways. And I followed that up with a text that just said, "I have politely asked that we go our separate ways and you agreed. Please stop contacting me." Of course, he had to respond one more time. "Okay, sorry. Just throw the postcard away. I won't send any more." So far, I haven't heard from him since. Oh wait, yes I have. I had not heard from him when I originally wrote this script. But then 1 month after that last message, last night, as of the time of me filming this last night. He tagged me in a comment on a bulldog video on Instagram. Just why? Telling this story in the way I did probably makes it sound like I should have recognized this all up front. It's easy to hear me tell it now and think, well, why didn't you just leave at the first couple of red flags? But again, it's only in retrospect that I pieced all of this together. Because I'm pinpointing these red flags for you and focusing on the bad stuff, they're easy to see. But they were spaced out, interspersed with all of these really great, exciting adventures and happy moments. And when you're in the thick of it, the red flags can actually seem like the anomalies. Andrew could be really affectionate and come off as very loving, but that's exactly what love bombing is intended to do. Love bombing can be overwhelming and suffocating, but it can also often feel really good, especially for someone that has been starved of love or even just companionship for many years. And a narcissist, especially a covert narcissist, is a master manipulator. They are excellent at talking their way out of situations, at explaining negative events in a way that makes you feel like their choices, their bad decisions, were completely reasonable or were even necessary. But eventually the red flags and the emotional abuse overtake the good. It's no longer the anomaly. And this in and of itself is part of the manipulation, because by that point you're in so deep, it's not as easy to get out. My case is just one example of this. He had manipulated me into moving into my home. He'd repeatedly told me about how devastating it was for his last girlfriend to move out just 24 hours after moving in. Every argument was laced with these little reminders of all of the things he's done for me, none of which I needed or necessarily even wanted, but that wasn't the point. The point was to make me feel guilty at even the thought of booting him out of my house, because then I'd just be another in a long list of people that have done him dirty. He would always be the victim. I learned about covert narcissism in a very roundabout way. I was laying in bed one night. This was pretty soon after he left Colorado. Remember way back at the beginning of this story, I mentioned I've been a member of many forums for narcissistic abuse for years? Well, a couple of them are on Reddit. I was going through my Reddit notifications from that day, and one of them stuck out. It was something along the lines of, why do narcissists claim to be empaths? The thread was story after story of the narcissist in someone's life claiming to be an empath. Now, someone who is a true empath usually won't tell people about it, because being a true empath can actually be pretty difficult to deal with emotionally, and it's often kept private. But much like a sociopath, narcissists lack empathy. However, they know what it is, and they are often very good at faking it. As soon as I saw this headline, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Right after I met Andrew, he made this big proclamation that he was an empath. It came up several times throughout our brief relationship. Anytime we got into an argument, or even when I just told him about some bad thing that had happened to me that day, even if it had nothing to do with him, he'd get completely sour, shut down, and just shut me out. And he'd claim later on that it was because he was an empath and he was just feeding on the emotional energy that I was putting out. So that led me down a Google rabbit hole. I think I searched something like, if someone claims to be an empath. I didn't even include the word narcissist. But what returned was article after article, post after post, with headlines such as, people who claim to be empaths are almost exclusively covert narcissists, and how to spot a narcissist disguised as an empath. This was actually the first time I'd seen the term covert narcissist, so of course I had to dig a little further. I read a number of articles that night, but it all ultimately led me to Dr. Ramani Durvasula, known online just as Dr. Ramani. Dr. Ramani is a licensed clinical psychologist, author, and professor of psychology that has focused her clinical and academic research on the etiology and impact of narcissism and the associated personality traits on human relationships, mental health, and societal expectations. Dr. Ramani has a fantastic YouTube channel with just a wealth of information, and I am pretty sure I have watched every single video on it. But in particular, she has a 3-part series breaking down and describing the characteristics of covert narcissism specifically. And that was where I started. Just minutes into the very first video in the series, I was validated. This is what I experienced. I have never in my life met someone that so embodies the specific traits of a particular personality style. Funnily enough, Dr. Ramani just released a new video a couple of days ago at the time of me finishing this script about what she calls performative empathy. It's basically mimicking empathy when other people are watching because it gives them that immediate validation that they so desperately need. Rather than being present with and actually empathizing with a person and their emotions, performative empathy is more like doing good deeds for the sake of other people seeing you do good deeds. I actually have a lot of examples of Andrew doing exactly this, but here's one in particular that I got drug into. He saw on a local message board that there was an elderly veteran nearby that needed help with yard work and cleaning up his property. Andrew asked if I would be willing to come help him. Of course, count me in. I was happy to go help, but I was mortified when Andrew took a picture of me mowing this guy's lawn and posted it on social media, tagging me with this big explanation about how we were helping someone in need. It made me extremely uncomfortable. Listen, the only time I post about donations or volunteering that I do is when I'm trying to encourage other people to participate. That was obviously not the case here. It's not like other people could fly out to Colorado and help us mow this guy's lawn. This was Andrew performing. Everyone, look at how I'm taking time out of my weekend to help this elderly man. It was honestly embarrassing. Anyway, Dr. Ramani's channel opened the floodgates and led me to a number of other researchers, counselors, and psychologists, and even just other survivors of narcissistic abuse sharing their stories. There's another channel on YouTube that I enjoy watching called The Common Ego, and it's run by a woman named Christina. And in one of her videos on covert narcissism, she was going through a list of signs that a person might be a covert narcissist. And one of them was, if you've ever wondered if this person might be autistic, you might be dealing with a covert narcissist. This one, again, hit me like a ton of bricks. But hear me out here. Fairly early in mine and Andrew's relationship, Rob and I had tickets to a concert, just me and him. And that night, in between sets, we were outside talking about this new relationship I was in. And I remember telling Rob that I sometimes wondered if maybe Andrew was on the spectrum. Just between his lack of social awareness, his manner of speaking, and his strange communication skills, the way he'd get upset or shut down at really minor things, inappropriate responses to emotional situations, the repetitive storytelling. So I looked into this further. I started searching things like narcissism and autism, and I quickly found that there actually is quite a bit of research linking the two. In fact, Dr. Khalid Mansour, a psychiatrist and researcher on behavioral neurology, wrote in an article in the Pan-Arab Journal of Psychiatry that narcissistic personality may merit classification as an autistic spectrum disorder. He wrote, "There is now a significant level of agreement that emotional processing problems like lack of empathy, poor self-awareness, self-centeredness, poor reciprocation of emotion, poor ability to maintain emotional relationships, anxiety, and anger outbursts are more or less central features of autism. It is noticeable that people with NPD do not show a major degree of functioning problems in stress-free environments or when they are supported. However, under stress and without support, they can become quite dysfunctional in a way not far from what we usually see in Asperger's syndrome. Since this experience, I have researched and read and watched as many videos as I can on the topic. I started learning more about all of the manipulation techniques and how they present, mostly so I can make sure that I never get sucked in by them again and, in the future. Knowledge is power. And now that I've seen it and experienced it and know what it looks like, I am much better prepared if someone tries to do this to me again in the future. So where do I go from here? You know what? I live my damn life. If nothing else, over my summer with Andrew, I rediscovered a side of myself that had been long lost. The side that doesn't just crave adventure, but goes out and actually finds it. And I'm not going to let that go. I'm more confident now than I have ever been in my ability to tackle new things on my own. And I just feel free. And you know what? I am grateful for the lessons I've learned. Everyone that knows me knows I don't regret anything. Mistakes I've made, bad decisions. It's how we learn and how we grow. And I want to finish this off with something really important. Manipulation, in all of its forms, is abuse. Don't let anyone tell you differently. And abuse is never your fault. I've had very well-intentioned people say to me that, it really looks like I have all my shit together. And they were surprised that I'd ended up in a relationship like this. But it can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter how strong you are, how independent you are, or even how knowledgeable you think you are. I was very well versed in other types of emotional abuse, but many of these tactics were completely new to me. I'd heard of some of them, but I'd never actually experienced it. I didn't know what signs to look out for. But guess what? I do now. And I am sharing my story in the event it helps even just one other person. But if you find yourself in a relationship or a situationship like this, it's not your fault. It is not your fault. You have done nothing wrong. You are a survivor. I will be including a number of resources and citations in the description box below. If you're comfortable talking about your story and you want to share it in the comments, please do. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay. The only obligation any of us have is to ourselves. You do what's right for you. And you know what? I think that's where I'm going to end it. I'm sleeping. It is 12:48. I sat down and started recording at 8:30. This is going to be like the longest video ever. Oh my god. I don't know how long this video is going to end up being, but man, I've got a little over 3 hours of footage to go through, and I am exhausted, and my throat hurts. So, yeah. I love you all. Own your story, and I'll see you next time. Hopefully with a way less heavy topic. Peace.